Hello, I'm Doug Benedict, and welcome to the Butler Esports interview series, where we're interviewing sports leaders, owners, and industry experts in the evolving world of esports. Today's interview is with Kurt Melcher. Kurt is a graduate from the University of Illinois Chicago, where he studied history and political science. Kurt created the first varsity-level esports program in 2014 at Robert Morris University, which is now Roosevelt University. Kurt is the executive director of esports for Intersport and adjunct professor at Northwestern, and holds board or advisory roles or positions with organizations including Riot, Scholastic Association of America, National Association of Esports Coaches and Directors, Esports Business Summit, and National Association of Collegiate Esports. Thank you for joining us today, Kurt.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be on.
Of course. Your intro is quite a mouthful, so we assume you have plenty to share. So how did you get started professionally? You studied history and political science. Now you're here.
Yeah, so at the University of Illinois Chicago, where I graduated in the history and political science major, I was also I played soccer at the school, and that I almost felt like in some ways that was my major, just because I love soccer so much. I took classes I liked. I was terrible at math, so my career after I graduated, I went into university administration. I was associate athletic director of Robert Morris, and I also coached the women's soccer team there for years and years. Robert Morris is a small NAI school in Chicago. And then really in 2013, 14, as I, and probably like a lot of the people watching and yourself, I loved video games my whole life. I was like a nerd jock, and I feel like it's kind of cool to say like you like video games nowadays, but like back when I was like playing, like I had to hide it in shame, right? Otherwise I'd get like wedgies in the locker room or whatever. But I came up on, I loved the first StarCraft, Brood War, Deep In, and so it's just always a real passion of mine to kind of keep current and stay on top of gaming, just because I loved it so much. So it was in 2013, again, as I've been working in athletics administration and coaching for years, that I saw and played League of Legends and got deep into League of Legends. And just through the client, I would see that there was this sort of support of a college community of clubs that were playing, schools were playing other schools. And I think it was in 2013, they had the first sort of like light championship, not a whole lot of structure around it, but that's when. And it was really through in-game when I was playing, it's just struggling in-game. I'm terrible. I'm like barely bronze, but I just have so much fun playing it, and just the team. And I almost exclusively solo queue, so like the team, I rely so much on them and the shot calling, right? Because I just it's a lot for me. And it was in there of like, man, this is such the people I'm playing with are so skilled. The playing against are just I can't believe how they're able to just manage so much information and make the right calls. And that was like, this 100% should be a sport. And so I kind of just drew up a white paper and I brought it to our administration saying like, listen, this is real. There's support now on the publisher side, even though it was small, but I think this would be potentially meaningful. And I think we could make a difference here. And it took many, many conversations. But eventually then they sort of saw, and I had to I felt like if I was, say, your age, Doug, and went into a university like, hey, this is important, we should do it, they'd be like, okay, thanks, Doug, great, out you go. But I have some professional cachet over the years built up in administration. I was on long-range plans, a couple other committees at the university, so I felt like I had a voice, and they trusted it. And so that's how I got started in esports, was onboarding the first varsity program, and then over time moved to Intersport to start up gaming and esports sort of vertical within Intersport.
So esports within Intersport, what's the mission of Intersport, and then how does that cross over with esports specifically?
Yeah. So Intersport is it's like a 35-year-old privately held sports marketing and production company. I do a lot of things in the world of college sports, actually. Like, so you may have even seen like the around the Final Four, the slam dunk and 3-point championship. That's Intersport. We run that for 20 years. A couple other properties like the Under Armour All-American game, high school All-Americans. That's Intersport. We run that along with a partner, Under Armour. So it was really, I honestly believe it was our CEO back in 2014-15, just reading in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times of Staples Center selling out for League of Legends, and Madison Square Garden selling out for esports, and brands were asking, because we do a lot of brand work. That's, I'd say, what the majority of kind of what Intersport does is service brands and sports and culinary, entertainment, and now esports are saying, like, hey, we need to have a point of view, and we need to be able to. We believe this is a growth area, and I give them a lot of credit for kind of being early. So that's what we do within Intersport. So I was the first hire in 2016 for sort of an esports vertical within this traditional world of sports and Intersport, and since then we've grown and play a role across a lot of the gaming industry. And we have, so now it's a team of 4 that we have, and we're doing a bunch of things, sort of in helping brands, working with publishers, leagues, teams, investment strategy at times, across like the gaming industry.
So your responsibilities, like daily, what are you doing? Who are you working with?
Sure. So a longtime partner of ours is Warner Brothers. We've, since 2017, Injustice 2 was one of their premier fighting game titles. I don't know if you remember that game. So we ran and produced the World Championship in Los Angeles that was broadcast on ESPN2. We then, in 2018, we operated the whole Pro Series tour, and then the finals, which were in Chicago, and continuing the partnership with Warner Brothers. Mortal Kombat 11 came out, and we operated that Pro Series tour and operated that World Finals. Pro Season 2, hopefully coming. COVID has kind of put a wrench in that whole planning cycle, but so operate on behalf of a publisher, white label, operate their whole esports. Really, just kind of like come up with the business plan, strategy, and at times sell into that property, as we did with Samsung in 2017, 18, 19. We do a lot of work with Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans. So we brought them into the 100 Thieves relationship, and we managed that relationship. We brokered the LCS Finals sponsorship in Detroit. We consult with brands, I would say, just about every week, different brands, right, as they're just interested in the space, want to learn more. Smithfield and Nathan's Hot Dogs. We have a long history with Smithfield on traditional side of sports sponsorship, but Nathan's Hot Dog, we worked with them to develop a year-long sponsorship of a streamer called Josh OG. Does a lot around Call of Duty, Warzone streamer, obviously a lot of other games, but a duo program where we'll bring in monthly a different streamer, and they'll duo together, sponsored by Nathan's. We for 3 years were consulted with the NCAA as they were considering and exploring should they have a potential role in supporting esports, or what does that look like? Member schools were asking them. So just really like a broad spectrum of brand, of publishers, of sometimes investment strategy across the space. So it's really fun.
Absolutely. It sounds fun. So, and you kind of mentioned this already, but COVID-19, how has it kind of affected operations?
Yeah, it's interesting. So as I mentioned, like Intersport all up, it does a lot of work around traditional sports and events, and those obviously have all been kind of put on hold. So I would say that has been the major disruption for Intersport as a whole. And Mortal Kombat 11, it was March 8th. It was at Park West in Chicago, and it was sold out. It was a 2-day event because there was a last chance qualifier and then the finals. And this was right when sort of everything was, culminating COVID side of things. And, WB made the decision after everyone had traveled for the sold out events, like no spectators, no fans. So we still held the event, but just in an empty stadium. And they made good. They compensated everyone for travel and for tickets and everything else. There was, like above and beyond really to take care of their community. So that has been like the major disruption is like sort of the event side of things, or brand and experiential activations. On the esports side of things, it's been interesting because I think the narrative, sort of just in the marketing trades and everything, is like, oh, there's this massive spike in gaming and in Twitch and in streaming and viewership. So I think what we still see, I think, in the just on the marketing side of things and brand work, is there's this gap of education of what is it, and I understand it's kind of big, but how do you engage with that? And so there's still like a fear of the unknown. I think in some ways COVID has just brought a little bit of a spotlight on the opportunity, in horrible circumstances. I'm not saying it solves all the problems, and it's going to be the NFL certainly, because it still has a long way to go, but in some ways, I think it's just brought more attention to gaming and esports, and I think that'll just be solved over time, and there'll be a broader understanding.
So you mentioned opportunity for Intersport, like specifically, where is the opportunity for continued growth in the competitive gaming market for you all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we see a lot of opportunity and a right to win in the fighting game space. We've been a long-time partner of WB. We understand. We've hired specifically to service that community, and because while I think the outside world and brands talk about gaming or esports as a one entity, when the reality is, as we know, right, there's really somewhat siloed. Okay, there's a League of Legends audience and community, and then there's an Overwatch community, and then there's a fighting game community, and within there's Mortal Kombat, and there's DOA, and there's Street Fighter. So you have to be really nuanced and have broad capabilities to be able to service like brand interests within there. So I think that is where we see opportunities in the fighting game space, because it's I believe it new turn on consoles, the generation of consoles. Some of the premier titles are going to have updates: Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, the Warner Brothers title. So I think that we have a good right to win there, and I think as I just kind of hinted towards that, I think the turn will be in brands being more aware and willing to engage in the space of sponsoring and targeting this audience. There was an Ad Age, which is like a marketing a magazine that's highly regarded, that compared like time spent versus marketing dollars spent. So like audience and eyeballs against marketing dollars spent. And so a linear audience, the percentage of media is 8% of like total audience, but still generates like $59 billion, right, of sponsorship and attention and advertising. Streaming, right, whether it's like streaming video, all those sort of things, has 21% of the audience, has like 15 billion. And gaming has 37% of the audience, yet 1.5 billion of spend so over time, there will be, in my opinion, just a recognition of, hey, we need to be where the audience is, and particularly the demographic of that audience, which is generally younger. The average age of a Major League Baseball viewer on linear television is 52. That's still shocks me. So I think over time that we're in the early stages of brands recognizing the value and where the audience is, and the value of that audience, and that's where I think will be the bigger turn over time, the next 10 years.
Absolutely. So taking like steps back to your start in esports,
mm-hmm.
Was there anybody when you were getting started that gave you advice about the field, gave you warning about the field? What were you told when you were first getting started?
Yeah, I guess like at Robert Morris, you mean, like starting the varsity program, or yeah. Yeah, it was a different time in college esports, like in 2014, than it is now. That's for sure. There were some that said like, oh, this is, like felt like it was, get demolished. Like our program got demolished on Reddit. Like, oh, this is a scam. This is, don't trust this. When I get why that would be received like that, just because it was out of left field. We didn't have a esport club at Robert Morris. It was literally me saying like, I think this matters, and forcing it in. But I would say I reached out to Riot, to be honest, and said like, hey, I'm like, and as naive as I was back then, I filled out a support ticket. That's how I like reached out to them, saying like, hey, I'm the athletic director. I'd like to start a varsity esports, and they're like, what? So they really helped a lot in forming just the messaging coming out of the gate. And I was, as naive as I was like, hey, I want to put my email out there. Like, no, you need to create like a separate email because you're going to get thousands. I'm like, okay, take it easy. I'm like, that's not going to happen. I did make a separate email anyways, and sure enough, they were right. It was like 10,000. So I leaned on Riot's expertise. I leaned on just the endemic space. Talked to a lot of club leaders. Talked to a lot of just people that were already doing like college esports in this space, not at a like a formal level, but just to get advice. And then the staff I hired really helped as well. Just understanding the space. I would hire expertise, and I knew, like as a bronze player, I was going to provide zero value to like the challenger players we had. So the expert staff we brought in, I leveraged like their knowledge as much as possible. And I think that's like in the same way for my time in Intersport is, and I'm sure you experience this as well. Like it's not like traditional sports where it's like cloak and dagger. Everyone is willing to help and share and cares for the industry so much that it like takes a village to build it and to properly support it and create it. So I think we're all doing that to an extent of say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think this works? So I'm not ashamed or embarrassed to reach out for help or ask questions. I think that's the way you create value across the whole industry.
Yeah. So walking further into this process of creating this program, right? Because this is now happening all over the nation, but you kind of started. What was the whole, you said you wrote down on a piece of paper what you thought. What was the whole selling process looking like? Was it you said you were involved with long-term planning. Was that, is that where you put it? How did you sell it?
So, and I've been asked this question so many times, like just for club leaders, everything else, like how do you do it? And so like, since I was involved in long range planning, I knew you have to hang your hat on a component of it. And if you can hang your hat of like formal esports on a number of different sort of like long range plan tiers, that will help your argument. And so being part of the long range plan, I knew student engagement was one of the top pillars that they wanted to improve. They understand, and it's just a fact, students that are engaged in something outside the classroom have better outcomes, graduate at a higher rate, better GPAs, better brand. So like they'll feel better about Butler. They want to represent Butler, and hopefully maybe in 15 years they'll maybe donate to ButlerEsports or to athletics or whatever. So that's what I kind of said, like, hey, this will engage a whole subset of students that we're probably not reaching at all. But I believed in the core element of, same way as Riot in those early days, we're supporting those competitive communities. And the reason why San Jose State was playing in other schools because they want to find out who's the best on campus, and they want to see how they compare against the other best on campus. So I was like, it's not just, in my opinion, student engagement. That is for sure an important part, but it is about that competitive element. And the same way as I got value out of my soccer experience through my coaching staff and the leadership and what I would get from that second classroom environment, I believed could be delivered through esports, but it had to be taken seriously. So that's why I said, like, no, it has to be in the athletic department, and it has to be supported the same way as we're supporting baseball and other sports. Otherwise, it's just going to be like a pony show. And then I knew it wouldn't be taken seriously. And I believed it. It sounds silly, but I respect video games. I respect, like, when I watch other players when I watch challenger players, I'm like, it blows my, same way as I watch like Leo Messi or something. I'm like, that's insane skill. Same as League of Legends or other games. So I wanted to treat it with that kind of respect. It sounds cheesy, but that's true. That's kind of true.
Yeah, no. So when you started, building it, did you have a mission? Did you have like that picture in your head of what you wanted it to look like? Was it all just kind of like, let's let it fall into place and see what we can make?
No, it was definitely, I modeled it after an athletic program that we would hire a staff, and we would have tiers of competitive teams, and we would bring in the best players we could find, and then we would find the best, and that would be the ones that are representing at the highest level. And other teams can certainly compete as Robert Morris, but in different tiers of competition. Collegiate Star League at that time, there was like Ivy Lowell, and just like now, there's a lot of different vehicles to play as JV or other, where they're still getting value. And it's not just bring in the varsity and hire a coach for them. It's also supporting staff to coach those teams, because they, like the question always is to me is like, is that student getting the value that they were expecting from the program? So if a silver player comes in and is like, say if I was interested in soccer and I loved League of Legends as a college kid, I'm bronze. I'm like, I know I'm not going to be challenger ever. I just don't have that skill set, but I love this game so much. I want to try to compete. And if I have a coach, like I could be happy with that experience and potentially get a scholarship or rewarded for my dedication and improvement. And maybe through coaching and just the environment, I could improve to platinum or something. Who knows, right? Like, so like that's the value exchange that I think is important, and that's how I envisioned it. It's like yes, let's like run it like a true sport, and I believe it'll be embraced.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking back and seeing yourself as you are now, what do you think the biggest challenges for programs today are, whether they're starting out or, just operating?
That is the question. The biggest challenges I think are now that I think it's somewhere around almost 400 like formal programs, but it's hard to define what is varsity, what is formal, what is the delineation there. I think what we're seeing a trend of is like a non-holistic approach, and it's schools recognizing, and this is happening, I would say, mostly at larger schools, are recognizing, okay, hey, we see this development across the landscape of schools supporting. We get, okay, this may be a future thing that students are interested in. Fine, let's just create the space and put it in rec, and then hey, we've done esports, we're doing it, great, perfect. Not it's not terrible. I think in 2014, if that was I think people would say this is amazing, but I would hope we're beyond that now, and that should be a component of it, because I do believe that similar to like basketball, right? Like I played on some rec basketball when I was in college, and it was fun. You get with your friends, right? It's still competitive, and I got value out of that. But I also like to cheer for our UIC varsity team, right, as they played in the Horizon League and stuff. So like if you're missing out on that, like what's the headline of in some ways like esports is that it's at its core, it's competitive. So I think that's a challenge in a way, is like, okay, but how do you provide that value to the school, right? And say like, hey, no, you should support it beyond that. So I think Butler's doing a great example of how to enter, right? It's a holistic program, right? It's like, hey, we are going to play in the Big East, and we're going to find our competitive teams and elevate them. But we also understand that there's value to a bunch of different titles and supporting a community around that. And there's potentially like curricular elements. And is there a broader community focus to technology and everything else? So like, I think it takes that broad view to solve some of those challenges. And I like, my biggest fear for college esports is that it becomes a dodgeball, right? Nothing against dodgeball, but like it's a great thing. Every campus has it, but it's like a rec kind of fun, right? And dodgeball, I'm sure, I don't even know, I'm sure there is some kind of pro dodgeball. I'm thinking about the movie, but like dodgeball isn't selling out Staples Center and all those sort of things. So like there's proof that it's relevant on a competitive sphere. So just to ignore that portion of it just because like, well, it's probably more expensive if we do so. Like, I'm going down a rabbit hole, but that's my that's my take on it, and is hoping that schools will, from the top, say like, okay, we could do just this small part related to esports, or is there a bigger role this can play? Understanding that our customer, what students like yourself and the students that you oversee, are only going to be more engaged in this as right in the next 15 years. When we see, I'm not sure what your space was, it got turned into, but like UCI, California Irvine is a good example. They turned the pool hall and dartboard space into their esports space. Like that's like, it's what students want to engage with and want to spend their time and how they like to hang out with friends. Like that is what's relevant. So having a broad view of gaming and esports and how students can engage with it and how it can be relevant to like a cross-curricular entity on campus with competition as one of those pillars is, I think, what should be the norm. But we're making it up. Everybody's making it up as we go, right? So you hope, I think, just by elevating like Butler's program and UCI's and Utah's and Miami, Ohio, like those sort of initiatives, I think is what is important to say like, hey, that's the standard we should try to meet.
Yeah.
That was a long answer.
No, that was great. That was a great answer. Taking part of that answer, the holistic piece of collegiate esports, jumping into the next thing that you're doing, the curricular part of it all, adjunct at Northwestern University. Tell us about the class. Tell us what the goals are. What are they working on?
Yeah. So, Northwestern University, it's for their Masters of Sports Administration. So the class is MSA 421, the Business of Esports. So I worked with a team of curricular development experts there, and we worked and over, I would say, over 6 months to develop this course. And really, it's a deeper dive on like the business side of esports, right? Who are the stakeholders involved? What's the difference between esports and video games? What's the value in esports to an audience? How are audience monetized? What are sponsorship challenges in the space? Professional esports leagues and structures, right? Franchising compared to, say, like a circuit system, or home and away like Overwatch and Call of Duty. So it's really, I would say it's providing those students that are pursuing a master's degree in sports administration. It's Northwestern's recognizing that, hey, this industry is massive and it's only growing. So they need to have a point of view and an understanding of what it is and what it means and how it's relevant in the world of sports administration, right? And obviously, there's that curriculum is focusing on traditional sports and audiences also. So it's just really a nod of like, hey, this is esports. This is what it looks like, and this is why it's important and why it's relevant. And here are the challenges and the nuances of that industry. And so it's really just like broadening their education of the sports industry.
So where did the need or the want of that class come from the university itself? Were there students asking about it? I mean, I guess at Northwestern, and how did you get drawn into it?
Yeah, it came from the university itself, and I was connected to them through a relationship. A VP at Intersport teaches the capstone course of MSA of sports administration. So as they were asking, like, hey, do you think this is something? So I was introduced to them, and then over time, they said like, hey, would you be interested in helping us form this course? So that's how that relationship started.
So you sit on all these boards and advisory positions and whatnot. I guess encapsulating all of that, what do you think? And I'm sure they're all addressing different problems. But what do you advise? What are you looking at? What are you looking at the industry as a whole, focusing on? I know you sit on coaching and directing, boards? Like, does that question make sense?
Yeah. I guess on the boards, yeah, I would say industry as a whole, that um, I think it's important to treat it with like, as say if you're bringing a brand in to be authentic to what they need to accomplish or want to accomplish, and matching that equally to what the activation is or what uh, the strategy is, because it's there's still like an education gap of like brands of what are esports, what are these platforms, what's the best way to engage. So my worry on the industry is that if they're being brought in and just sort of quick take money, right, like, oh, let's just put a logo here or whatever, that's not going to have sort of that relevance and won't deliver for the brand. So I think it really, like, brand activations have to be really expertly nuanced and thought through, and making sure that it's going to deliver for that brand. So like, when you see just a lot of like newsy reports of esports as a whole industry growth, all those sort of things, there can be sometimes where, and you probably all of this that are close to the space, you look through or you see online of something, you're like, that makes zero sense. So you worry that brands, if they're like, oh yeah, we should try this, and if they do it improperly and they get burned, they're like, esports is horrible, I'm never coming back, right? Like, we tried it, remember what a disaster that was? So that is a worry of mine a little bit, that there may be like a little bit of FOMO out there of like, okay, we just got to do this, and it's like, that doesn't work, forget it, we're out forever, or it'll take a long time to come back. So I think the industry side, even, and this goes to publishers too, and how they're activating and how they're standing things up, and making sure that things are sustainable and things are relevant to audiences, that is like, will add value to the health of esports and gaming longer term. I think that's where I think like some of those boards I'm on, and I try to preach and say, like, that's, you have to, if you're doing X, Y, and Z, you have to think about these things too, right? Like, rethink them.
Yeah. So the big question that I'm asking,
Yeah.
and whether this is selfish for me or not, but where do you see the industry going in 3 to 5 years? What do you think? What do you think the growth is? What do you think the expansion looks like? Everyone's got a different answer, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that like gaming will continue to grow. I think esports on the professional side of things will always be a little bit of a hit and miss sort of proposition. Like a good example is like H1Z1 League, right? Like, that was at Vegas. Like, that was a good example of probably not the best idea, and it was sort of, it felt like headlines leading strategy, and it didn't work out so good for everybody involved. So and it's still so new. Publishers are right, franchising of esports, franchise positions in leagues is a new concept, right? So we're just seeing, like, is that working? What are the unintended outcomes of that, like, in a broader community and all those sorts of things? So it's fascinating. I think gaming is for sure as a whole will grow. Esports for sure as a whole will grow. There will be new titles. There will be new initiatives. There will be there will always be a little bit of a churn and a I guess evolution, because it's still so early. So I believe in the gaming industry and esports industry as a whole growing, but there will be like bumps in the road for sure. So I think, and I think, as I mentioned before, I think brands will recognize and get smarter about the space, whether internally or externally, seeking help to understand the audience and engage with it. So I think we're at the early stages of what sort of the opportunities are for gaming and esports, and sort of like the professional marketing and support side of things.
From your expertise, say there are students watching this right now, or students around you, you've been working with students, what would you say to them interested in getting into the industry of esports? Whatever side of the industry, I suppose.
Yeah, I would say, if you're a college student and you have a passion for it, get involved at your university, even if it's on a club side. That experience is valuable for for your next step in the professional space. I would also say are there ways to find like externship where you can partner, or now the world is virtual, and I think these learnings of virtual work and everything else will be extrapolated past when things go back to normal. Is there value you could bring to saying like, hey, is there a potential externship that I could maybe get a credit hour or something, or if it doesn't even exist, I would say go to your advisor and bring up the potential opportunity, and then market yourself outward to teams, to publishers, to platforms, and say like, hey, I will do this potentially for credit. If not, are there summer externships or internships you can get? As much relevant as experience as you can get will be such a plus up, again, because it's all still so new. There's not a whole lot of expertise out there, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot that say, but like actually having knowledge and broad knowledge across gaming is going to be really valuable and really important, in my opinion, in the next, say, like 7-10 years.
Yeah. So the final question that we ask everybody, let us know who your friends are, essentially.
Sure.
Who are 2 other industry leaders, organizations that you think can provide us an extremely unique perspective like you have?
I don't know who you've talked to. Have you talked to anyone from Twitch Student like Kevin Huang or Garvey? I think Kevin Huang would be great. He would love to do. He leads Twitch Student. He stood up the program at University of Washington when he was a student. Now works for Twitch Student for the last 5 years, maybe 4 years, doing some great things in partnering with like the HBCU space. But just he's been as involved in this college space as I have. Great person to talk to. And I would say also might be relevant to you is like Chris Haskell from Boise State University, because I think a component as we're talking about college esports and value and sort of delivering value and building brand is exactly what you're doing. I think broadcasting and production is sorely lacking in the college esports space. Right? People always say like, oh, college esports, yeah, I get it, but no one watches, no one cares. But no one really watches, I think, to a degree, because like, it's the only time it gets expertly produced is if, at the Big East or Mountain West or Riot's finals. I think just having a constant channel of information and relevant gaming to Butler Esports, like you're doing now, is massively important. I think from a competitive broadcast element, Boise State is best in class, and so his perspective in that regard, I think, would be really valuable to talk through and understand. And he's done it. Like he was a professor on campus. He still is a professor on campus, but has just gone down the rabbit hole of production and is. I would put him up with any professional production person at Riot. Like he's just in deep. Like he'll say, oh, you have to get this 368/27 board because it does 18 channels. I was like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. So it's just. And if you have a chance, you could check it out. It's just best in class in the college side of things in production, and I think that needs to evolve on the college side.
Absolutely.
I think Butler, that was outside of what you're doing here, but that is, I think, also was like, I don't know if that was in the future plans of like having some broadcast capabilities, a studio, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Those are great suggestions. Extremely well thought out. That's pretty much everything we got to wrap for this interview session. I want to thank you, Kurt, for being here, joining us, and stay safe, stay well.
Thank you,
Go
Doug.
Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Doug. Bye.